been seeing cases like the detention of Mahmoud Khalil. We've also seen recently too the case of Rumaisa at Tufts University. So something I think kind of just want to open this and pass to Solomon. Do international students have the same rights to protest as U.S. citizens? And then what risks do they face with that?
These questions because of the answer. Before I get to it though, assalamu alaikum everybody and wa alaikum salam. As you both have greeted me also. Yeah, it's really the honor is mutual. It's been really fun. I fun is maybe the wrong word. Type two fun. I really enjoy Ahmed and Adam. So it's been one of the great things. I was actually just talking to my fiance about this. One of the great things about the work that I do is that I really enjoy my clients and I really enjoy my coworkers, and that extends to my coworkers outside of my organization as well. It's always good to do work defending protesters and to do work, to fight the good fight in this way. It's also makes it easier when I'm in a very real way doing it for and with my people, fellow Muslims, and a lot of the times I'm working with folks who are black and brown and who are going through different trials and tribulations with the government. And so, what a great segue to your tough and unfortunate first question. So there, anyone lawfully in the country, there is a good argument, and I know this isn't a very reassuring answer, but there's a very strong argument that they have the right to protest. Green card holders, lawful permanent residents, it's much more established. There's a bit of an open question. There's some courts have said yes, certainly. F1 student visa holders have the First Amendment right to protest. Some courts, there have been a handful of courts that have said no in particular circumstances. Of course, I'm very interested in making the argument on one side to say that everyone has the right to protest. But I can say with a good measure of confidence, and I think that this is probably well, I know that it's reproduced in materials that ACLU of Pennsylvania and ACLU National have put out, that yes, F1 student visa holders do have a right to protest, but the reality is that it's more dangerous. And I think if you're protesting, um, if an F1 student visa holder is protesting uh, I don't know, something about the environment, protesting, or especially if they're protesting, let's say something that Trump supports, if you're protesting in support of fascism or in support of something else ridiculous that he supports, then you're probably at a lot less risk, right? I think that's that even if we take this out of the context of immigration, the same advice I give whenever I'm speaking to folks who are protesting against police, a group of U.S. citizens. If I always say, yes, it is true that officers are not supposed to hit you for no reason out of nowhere, especially when you haven't been violent. But especially if I'm speaking to Black folks, I say, but there's still a chance that this could happen. You're protesting about police brutality, and so the police are going to be upset. In the same way, protesting about Palestine, protesting about DEI initiatives, protesting about anything that Trump is upset about, is just it is a little bit more dangerous. The difference is here, of course, that the result could be immigration detention and then eventually at least an attempt to remove someone. So the consequences are quite high.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, so the consequences, right, are extremely high. Um, I think something I think international students, across the country are very nervous to what they should do. Should they just try to hide away, hide from ICE, not show up on campus, maybe just go to class and go home. Um, and then other students, they still want to, be exercising their, protesting, or their First Amendment rights to protest. Is there anything that you're advising these students on what to do? Especially, I think something that's very concerning is that, you know, especially in the case with Mahmoud Khalil, they were returning from having iftar.
Yeah.
Rumaisa, she was detained
Put
going to
away.
have iftar, so it seems, they're very cognizant of when we are breaking our fast. I know everybody's probably, we're getting close to the end of the day here, right? But I think that's something that's very concerning for the Muslim community as a whole, that's really being kind of factored into when they're
Weaponized.
detaining people. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. There's a form of there's almost a sense of like religious persecution there. I don't know if that's in I don't know. I wouldn't go so far to say that in like a legal sense. I'm just not sure. Um, but it is definitely troublesome. I it's hard to say, in Pennsylvania we haven't, as far as I'm aware, we haven't seen ICE pick up any international students. We haven't seen anyone. We have, there've been a handful of raids, but those have been more so from um, a perspective of they haven't been based off political grounds, as far as I'm aware. They've been kind of just like, here's a group of brown people, let's just try to pick them up. That's happened a couple of times, but we haven't seen anything on this like free speech related stuff in Pennsylvania yet. But the question is a very real question. I've been recommending that folks with international students with folks with F1 visas or any other kind of non-immigrant visa, that they reach out to the ACLU Pennsylvania. They reach out to us, and we've been having conversations with folks, individual conversations, to kind of explain what would be a good idea of how to prepare for something. Because at the end of the day, there's I don't know that there's a real way to minimize risk other than not protesting. There's which is something that I don't necessarily advise people do, but whenever I say like this is the way to reduce the most risk, that is of course one of the things I mention. Um, so yeah, it's doing those things, but eventually you're going to run out of groceries and you have to get groceries. Eventually you're going to go to work. Eventually you're going to want to leave your house, your home, and um, that's an unfortunate but real danger right now. I think one thing I try to tell folks as this is part of the conversation I'll have with folks on an individual level, is to kind of assess your own risk. If you're someone who's been very vocal and loud about your advocacy for Palestine and for other things that the Trump administration is really against, but I think especially Palestine right now, then you may be at a little bit more risk. If you are I think the general rule of thumb is that if you are a woman, you're probably less at risk. But if you're a hijabi, then you're probably more at risk because you look, quote unquote, look more Muslim. There's a host of different kind of like factors there that kind of play into that. But I will like kind of talk to folks about that. Um, yeah, and I think the last, I guess the main thing is just having a plan to do of what to do when you're doing, if you were to be detained, and then to really use the buddy system. I know that can be exhausting, and it's also not possible for everyone to always have someone with them, especially if they live alone or something like that. But yeah, it's certainly a scary time.
Yeah. No, thank you. It's a little bit depressing, right? Having these conversations and not having a clear, like, you can do X, Y, and Z, and like the government can't infringe upon that. But like you said, these are scary times, and I think really kind of knowing the ins and outs of what our rights are, and then what the government can do, clear lines of what they can't do, is pretty much the best we can do. And guiding people right now. I know with the Philadelphia Bar Association, they're having immigration like roundtable talks. And they're pretty much, the immigration attorneys on there were like, well, if you participated in protests, like the government knows that you were there. So it's just a matter of when, if and when, they're gonna cancel your student visa. That they've already had these recordings. People, they're using AI. Private people are creating their own lists and sending them to DHS. So if you participated, it could be at any time that like either your student visa gets just canceled. They said like you could log on to the student,
USCIS.
yeah, and like the CVIS, I think the student exchange
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Yeah.
portal thing. And that it'll just be like canceled. And then once that's canceled, then you can't be enrolled in school. And it's going to be like a snowball of all these consequences in a matter of a few, minutes once that gets canceled. Um, so that's something that, you know, very alarming. But with that, I think the key thing that you said was planning what to do. And I know people have been saying, like, if you don't have anybody's phone number memorized, meet with an immigration attorney and have their phone number memorized. Like, that's one thing you need to do. Because when you are detained, I think that's something. Actually, before I keep going, sorry, Ahmed, I see your hand up. I don't want to. You.
No, 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 not at all. I think it was I can lower that. But we are also seeing questions coming in the chat as well. Some good questions from Jesse, and I'll add a few questions that I've received too. Sorry about that. Please continue.
Oh, no. Yeah, so I guess that's would you recommend not traveling for both green card and US citizens during these times if you've advocated for Palestine, especially as a college student?
Yeah. I know I said I was going to address that next, but you said something, Adam, that I want to get to first, and then I'll look at this. So, um, talking about what is illegal and not is different than talking about what the government can't do and what they can do. And I brought up the example earlier about folks who are protesting police brutality. I think it's probably the clearest analog, like similar kind of circumstance where the protesters will get extremely harsh treatment. It's still not the same. There's still some pretty big differences, but it's the most similar. And I tell folks in that context as well, the government is not supposed to fire rubber bullets at you because you were marching in the street. They're not supposed to use sound cannons that deafen you. They're not supposed to mace you or spray pepper spray in your face again because you are marching down the street. Volume notwithstanding, as long there have been multiple instances and multiple cases that I've been on and I've helped out with where people the violent people are the police and the counter protesters. The protesters did not bring the violence. The protesters oftentimes don't even bring weapons, and then weapons are used against them. And in those instances, that those actions are illegal, but government, officials, police officers are still doing it. And this is, I think one of the realities of being in organized society is that it's not as organized as as it appears to be in a textbook. And I think that's a reality. It's a reality that I'm coming to grips with. It's a reality that I think a lot of us are coming to grips with. It's a reality that I think a lot of folks around the world have known and maybe have lived with for a long time because of whatever the case may be. My fiance is actually was grew up in Haiti, and so is very familiar with a government that is not that doesn't operate based off of what's necessarily in their documents in their constitution all the time or whatever the case may be, and so um, it's jarring though. I'm not trying to say like, oh, this is normal, so don't worry about it. Maybe it's happened in other places, but it's still very distressing. And so I just wanted to kind of say that to kind of highlight those differences between can and can't and legal and illegal. The good news is that when they do illegal things, there's some measure of justice that can happen after the fact. Unfortunately, it doesn't do anything in the moment, it doesn't do much in the moment, anyways. And what we can do, though, is prepare so that hopefully if things can be vindicated, your rights, your liberty, your freedom can be vindicated. Um, Now, to your questions, would I recommend not traveling? So, for U.S. citizens, I had I say this a little bit as a joke, but also it speaks to like the scariness of the times. I have a friend who's pro-Palestine, but like hasn't really protested that much. Literally has no social media, is white, and is a dual citizen of the U.S. and the U.K. and is coming back soon. And it's like, Solomon, am I gonna get in trouble? And I was like, honey, you're a white woman who's an American citizen. You're fine. You're gonna be fine. Like they don't know nothing about your politics because you're not like you're fine. US citizens are of course at very little risk. That said, um I've been stopped, but not because of my pro-Palestine activism. I don't know if it's because of my afro or what, but I've been stopped for additional screening on two occasions. Um, Before I reverted to Islam, actually, funny enough. But you know, it's not to say that there's nothing they can do, but U.S. citizens have a lot more protection. At borders and airports are borders. It doesn't need to just be a land border or a border with like the ocean. U.S. citizens have a lot more rights, and so too do lawful permanent residents or green card holders. Um, I would say that the best way to avoid um, risk for a U.S. citizen, I mean, the risk is that they waste your time. And that you are perhaps delayed massively in your travels, especially if it's you miss a layover or connecting flight. For a green card holder, it's the same, with though, of course, the added and likely illegal threats of trying to detain you and deport you, like they're doing with Mr. Khalil right now. Um, that's scary. And so if I'm not going to be, and I do this, I say this to anyone I advise. I will never tell someone not to go see their grandmother one more time if that's what traveling means, right? That's a decision you have to make. And before I was an ACLU attorney, I was an immigration attorney, and I had these same conversations. I'm never going to tell you no, don't go. I'll tell you what the risks are to the best of my ability, but I'll never tell you no, don't do that. And I also at the same time would never chastise someone who maybe gets in some sort of immigration related trouble coming back because if you felt that it was important enough to leave and go do whatever it is you wanted to do outside of the country, good. That's I think um, one of the things that the federal government is doing is really weaponizing fear in a very powerful way. And one of the things that fear attacks most is our ability to live. I'll never tell someone not to live. Never would I ever advise someone not to live. I will tell you the risks of living your life in a particular way, but I'll never say that not to live. And so, as for traveling, I think it definitely reduces risks if you don't travel. But also, I'm not going to tell you not to live. Um, yeah.
That's no, very insightful. And let's I have just a few comments. Even before what's going on under this Trump administration, right? Like you said, we've all been stopped. I'm pretty sure every Muslim traveler has to be, extra get the extra search, like every time. But even people coming in back to the United States, right? Like a US citizen, generally like they're allowed back in the United States, right? No matter what. Now we have seen in situations where DHS has said, well, you're not giving us your password to your phone. So yeah, you're allowed back in America, but we don't have to let you fly back. We're not letting you fly back. You're gonna have to drive back. So we've had people had layovers, who were then forced to, drive 20 some hours back to the United States. They're allowed to come back in. So just want to emphasize too that they can make it like very difficult. Not, you know, and we have people who come and said they were detained for 8 hours, 9 hours, and you know, at that point you have to make the decision whether you are gonna give your password. We always recommend not, because if you are a citizen, you know, they can't stop you from coming back into the country. They can make it difficult, they can waste your time. But I think right now we're in this real gray area too with, you know, green card holders, people on visas about their social media. Heard recently like that's something that the administration is wants everybody's social media handles, and going forward how that um you know, I think that would be very problematic. But in the immigration context, it does seem like the government has more authority to,
We do.
right, do these like background facts finding, you know, endeavors, even if it is only targeting specific people because of their speech. They sometimes can mask it under other things, right? Um, have you, do you have any advice about social media? When,
Yeah.
how to use it? What about with traveling?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more concrete on social media. I think it's just a good idea to not necessarily get rid of it, but certainly scrub it. To if it's not locked to only to folks who can who are your friends to do that. I now, I say that I'm a little bit more like concrete about it, but still, I know I've spoken with a handful of people in the last calendar year who intentionally have their social media public because they want people to see it and they want the messages to be out that they're putting out and things like that. But in all of those instances, I believe they were U.S. citizens. You know, actually, I'm not sure because it didn't come up at the time. So who's to say? But yeah, the again, less risk if you're a U.S. citizen. Still, as you were just talking about, Adam, like there's still the risk of being stopped and having a much more difficult time flying in and out of the country. Mind you, that only you'll only come across Customs and Border Patrol really if you're flying in and out of the country. I guess you could be, screened additionally by TSA, and perhaps they could call Customs and Border Patrol, or there could even be Customs and Border Patrol agents waiting with TSA. And yeah, they're in an airport. They could still try to hassle you. I bet it's less likely, but it could still happen. So again, I think yes, to be safe, it would be best to get rid of all of your posts about anything related to Palestine or topics that Trump doesn't like. I've heard of. I believe there was a French, not diplomat. He was an artist in residence or something who had some sort of fellowship and flew in to the United States and um, had information on his phone that had like texts that were just like Trump's dumb, and then he was denied entry, had to go back to France, right? Like things like that are happening. Really petty, small things like that are happening. That was probably more so because they don't like France, and it's like they're the politics with Europe and trying to be strong and all of that. But these things are still they're happening, and so because they're happening, I think it's worth thinking through. Do you mind if I just start to kind of go down these other?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as signing an NDA, I think it depends on what the NDA says. I would never suggest that you sign something unless I know what it says, right? Just like as an attorney. But the like a do not disclose kind of agreement is a good idea. But if the federal government subpoenas, or rather gets a court order to force them to give up the records, depending on the type of charity and depending on the records. But I'm pretty sure all records, really, especially if it's for national security purposes, they would still have to give that up. So it's helpful because it would give you protection if if they gave it up without a warrant or without a court order, but it still could get in their hands. And then the last one, if there are any lawyers that I would recommend, all the lawyers that I know are busy. They are very very busy, myself included. Still, I would recommend reaching out to immigration attorneys. I can send there's a couple of websites that I know of, but typically we send folks to Nationality Service Center and HIAS, but I believe they have banners on their website right now that say that they're not taking any more intake because they're just over capacity, unfortunately. I don't
And
think it's just
sorry.
real quick. I don't think you really need someone to look over your papers necessarily. Well, that's not true. I was gonna say I don't have no idea what your status is like. If you believe that you have lawful status right now, you likely don't need someone to look over your papers. But if you think that your status is if you're not sure if your status is lawful, then you would definitely need someone to look over your papers. Sorry,
And
Adam.
no, no, sorry, just wanted because we do have a few Muslim immigration attorneys. So if somebody does need, reach out to us and we can try to connect you with some of our partners. That's something we are trying to. But like you said, everybody's so swamped right now.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll send Adam my list afterwards, and then maybe you could send that list to folks. It's not a very long list that I have,
not
but I'm
yeah,
happy to anyone I of course.
but definitely. Um, and that's something that like we've done a few presentations with some immigration attorneys over the past couple months, right? In anticipation of all the or not in anticipation, like we've been doing it in response to these things that the Trump administration is doing. And over the couple months, it's like getting worse, right? So a new issue comes up, then we do another talk like this. Before we were talking about the rescission of the memo where, ICE can go to houses of worship or something like that. But pretty much the immigration attorneys are saying, meet with the immigration attorney. So you have that like relationship that if something does happen, you're not trying to scramble to find out like who should I get as an immigration attorney. If you are detained by ICE, like in that moment, we're seeing too is like you have like after a couple hours, right? We may not know where you are in the country, which is I think a different uh, kind of different tactics that have been used before. But if you don't have like a phone call or have a family member that can call your attorney right away to try and get on the case, you could end up halfway across the country in a matter of a few hours. So that's something we're really encouraging people to create some relationship with an attorney beforehand,
Yeah,
that knows who
absolutely.
you are, right? And just even like the personal level, right? When you know someone, you meet with someone, like they're willing to like people are more willing to jump, if something happens. So really create that relationship, and we can try to help facilitate that at all if possible. Sorry, and then you can continue if there's other questions here.
No, not a problem. Actually, I think I'm gonna ask Ahmed, could you tell me a little bit more about the or Adam, either of you, but about the completing forms about social media accounts? I've
Yeah, this is actually back in December. One of the prominent imams in Pennsylvania, uh, a white person, convert to Islam, an imam, a public figure, was driving in from Canada, and he was asked to complete this like one-page form that has like biographical information, but also like include your social media account handles and as such. And he reached out to us and some others saying, hey, like I'm being asked about this. And of course our advice at that point is that you don't need to provide them an information, especially as an American citizen, and that we always will encourage you to not say more. And he was like, you have my passport, you have everything that you need. Beyond that, I'm not going to complete anything. Um,
This was
beyond
in December.
this was back in December, yeah.
I hate Biden. Please continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
Please
I think
continue.
like while being like recognizing that we are at a different moments, right? Also, let's not assume that ICE is a new problem and all of that. But that aside, um, if obviously like an American citizen's response to that might be different than a green card holder or
Right.
a student visa holder. So if people are being asked to do this additional step, what would
Yeah.
be the case?
So the reason why I said that about Biden is because he's just the most disappointing president, I think, in history. He just had. if I cared enough about American history to write a book, or if I ever wanted to write a book, and I don't, neither of those are on my wish list, I would write a just a long poem about how much Biden just dropped it, just had so much opportunity to do so many good things and just failed at every turn. We're putting that away for a moment. Um, yeah, I think U.S. citizen pushing back on that. I also sorry, one more thing. The reason also why I was like, oh no, is because there's definitely a part of me that feels like the moment that white people aren't safe, it's like it's really not. We're really in a bad place. Like if whiteness doesn't give you a leg up in an interaction with law enforcement, that's it's it's just a really clear show of the times. Again, I'm gonna go past that. Um, Completing the forms. I think what that person did as a U.S. citizen was smart. Calling someone, and I think that self advocacy is something anyone could do. You have my passport. You have everything you need. What's going on? Um, Threatening. I always say you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. I think it's best to be kind at first. If they keep pushing back, um, then you can make a phone call. That phone call doesn't even need to be to an attorney. You can just pretend, call your voicemail, you know, and then come back with some heat and saying like, you have my passport, you have everything you need. I'm a U.S. citizen. What are we doing here? Green card holders. I think the decision is up to you. I mean, the decision is always up to you, but green card holders have nearly the same right to being in the country as citizens, in the sense that they are there's the idea that they are intending to make the U.S. their permanent home, lawful permanent residence. They are here. Their presence is known. It's they've done everything they needed to do in order to be a green card holder. There's already so much paperwork you have to fill out. There's already so many hoops you have to go through, and so um, your rights are nearly the same as citizen. However, there are because of some blatantly incorrect interpretations of the immigration statutes, the Trump administration is trying to treat green card holders like they just got here yesterday, and also they have a lot of drugs on them right now, and it's ridiculous, right? It's incorrect. It's illegal. But what's incorrect and what's illegal doesn't, as I said earlier, doesn't always dictate what can happen and also what happens. So where a U.S. citizen can be delayed, a green card holder can be detained for quite a hefty amount of time, and then that's it's a question of do you want to be detained for that long, and that long could be a couple hours, it could be a couple of days, perhaps, or maybe even longer, especially depending on if you're traveling alone and if others know, right? Like there's all of these things are part of the circumstance. Um, I have a very blended family. One of my sisters is from Uganda. I'm American Black, but one of my sisters is from Uganda, and if she were traveling alone coming into the country, I would tell her, give them your phone, tell them your password, make it home alive, please. Like that's, you know what I mean? That's it really is. That would be my advice to her, but I think it depends. If I was traveling with her, it would be a different story. I might go to jail for hitting an officer. I have a short fuse. My middle name is Furious, and especially when someone's messing with the people I love, the fuse gets real short. So um, I always tell myself I'm better, I'm more useful out of jail with the law degree than I am in jail. So I've thus far been able to keep my cool, but um, the idea of that is very frustrating for visa holders of any kind, including student visa holders. Um, they have a lot more liberty to say that you are not allowed in the country. I'm going to speak very vaguely right now, in part because we're recorded, but also in part because there's nothing firm for me to like really share. But there are some very smart people that I know in some great organizations around the country that are thinking through the issues related to especially student visa holders being told that they can't come into the country, or rather come back to the country. Um, I for a while, I think everyone thought that the answer was, of course, the federal government can stop you from coming in. I think that's probably still pretty close to true, but again, some very smart people I know are thinking through, um, is there maybe an exception to that, especially for First Amendment free speech related issues and protest related issues.
Solomon, can I ask a follow-up on that? Um,
Yeah.
how how long do you think it'll take until we have some type of answers, right? I think kind of the scary thing about this time is like we don't have any answers right now. So yeah, how long do you think until we start to like realize like, okay, this is how the government is, it's going to be legal for them to act in this way, or it's going to be illegal, and then challenge, fight that if they continue to do what they're not supposed to do, like you were kind of talking about earlier. But if we can,
Yeah.
yeah, get that determination of whether this is legal or illegal, how long do you think that will take?
So the only body that can determine definitively what is and is not legal or illegal um, is the U.S. Supreme Court. So um, it frankly could take years, and I know that's not a good answer. I hate this. This is the worst part of my job when I have to answer questions like these because I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna tell you the truth. Um, and I'll also say, in the same way that there are all kinds of things that are illegal that the government still does, there are all kinds of unlawful things that the people still do, right? Most cities across the country say that you can't jaywalk. You have to cross at a crosswalk, and if you don't, you get a fine of some kind. Everybody jaywalks. Immigration law is not jaywalking. I know I'm comparing, I don't know, raisins and mountains. They're very different. But um, I think that there may come, I think there will come a time when the people of this country, and that's not the citizens, that's every sentient human being in the country, will get fed up with what's happening, with some level of what's happening, and will force things to be different. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm predicting a violent overthrow of the government. That's not what I'm saying at all. I actually think it'll be nonviolent, but I think that there will be. I don't think it'll happen when someone is when a student is told they can't come back to the country. Um, but I think that there will be something big that happens that the U.S. that either the Supreme Court will say no, that's illegal and everything will be fine, or they'll say yes, that's illegal, and there will be a large upheaval that I think would radically change how things work in the country with regards to immigration. That I think you can't play with people's liberty for as long as the government has and not expect some sort of retribution at some point. I've long thought this from the first time I was introduced to the immigration system to today. I really do think that that day will come. I don't know exactly when, but that's a thing. I know that sounds really big and maybe a little philosophical. My first name is Solomon. Remember all of the names of Solomon. So that sounded sacrilege. Excuse me. Anyways, we're going. The because like I said, because the U.S. Supreme Court is the ultimate decider in a way, I think that it will probably take years. I think we'll have glimpses of this. I think Mahmoud Khalil's case is very strong. I've had a chance to look at the papers, and I think that he has a really good shot. And win, inshallah, win. He wins. I think that the judges who write that opinion will probably give some guidance on some of these other issues that we're talking about, because they see that these are very big issues and that we need help, we need something. And I also think that the judges in these cases are so fed up with the Trump administration's attorneys that they're going to drop little breadcrumbs to try to help those of us who, and not because these judges are necessarily pro-Palestine or even because they particularly care about immigrants, but because they don't like Trump and they care about the law because without laws, what are we doing?
Right. I think that's a very good point in that even just like the due process of it, right?
Mhm.
Like the procedure. I think the immigration judges are sticklers for that. And I think even just people, non-immigration attorneys who try to practice before immigration judges, I've heard stories that they are like very concerned about the process and the procedure, because the stakes are so high for it not being criminal, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
like it's being removed, it's like exiled, right, from the United States. Like being in jail and being able to see people, even if it's once a month or something like that, would still be in
Yeah.
most contexts like better. So I do I still think, it's a very unjust system, right? Like I know immigration judges talking like, there's like
Absolutely.
3-year-old children who are, self-represented. In Philadelphia, like they were very proud that like all children were represented by an attorneys, but that took like a lot of work to get that
Yeah.
in place. And not everywhere is doing that. Um, I feel optimistic that there are a lot of people and organizations, trying to fight this. And right, every issue that comes up, we do have to fight it to kind of chip away at what the Trump administration is doing. And like you said, if we can get any little wins or like even just one sentence of an opinion that we can take and apply it into a different context that can help us in other areas, something, I think it's like all hands on deck, but we are having meetings like CAIR-Philadelphia, ACLU, PA, like the Free Migration Project. We are meeting with different organizations that we want to be on the right side of this, and we want to get these wins. So very appreciative that.
Not only
Okay.
I was just gonna say not only in Pennsylvania, but I mean the sister who's recently abducted, ACLU Massachusetts is working with her. Of course, we've already talked about Mr. Khalil, and that's the ACLU affiliate in New York. I believe I keep getting Virginia and Maryland confused because of the DMV, but one of them is also representing the person from Georgetown University. Um, and besides all of that, I can tell you I've got colleagues across the country that we've been in contact with who are thinking, preparing, wondering, researching, writing, thinking about what to do, how to prepare. And yeah, there's one good thing is that we have a large number of people. We're very mighty.
Come to that. Come to that. No, I think that I am optimistic, right? That I think before it was kind of like, oh, the government has a lot of leeway with immigration context. And it was almost like, oh, defer to the president on immigration, like they can do whatever with enforcing it. But there are some of these little, like even right, I believe Mahmoud Khalil is back in New Jersey, right? Or no.
I think that the cases in New Jersey, I think they're still arguing about whether to release him, but the tea leaves are pointing towards he'll be released or at least brought to detention in Jersey soon.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
just from
not,
me reading the papers. I don't have any inside knowledge about anything. That's just like, yeah,
but I think even, there being that pushback that like the government can't just ship you across the country because they want to find a
right.
judge that's gonna, rule in their favor. It's a small win, but that's still something that like
Yeah,
if we don't have that, then we're not getting any win. So I do
right.
appreciate this.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I agree. I agree.
Sorry to interrupt. We have a few new people joined us. I know we'll probably wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so, but just as a reminder for them, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We have, just to be extra cautious, limited the ability to unmute and as such. I think, Salman, you've answered Romina's question in the chat, but just in case folks are not able to follow the chat, there was a question around if we recommend that folks take their passports, green cards with them to protest if they do choose to continue going. And Solomon's answer was yes, but do not lose it. And of course, I guess, like, we should clarify that that does not apply, however, to if people are without status. In that case, they should not. Is that correct? For the
Yeah,
attorneys, I think not. In that case, it's better to not have your whatever nationality you are with, the papers from that setup. But thank you, Romina, for that question. I guess there's that question that initially we were advising international students to be in touch with their international students office and, like, continue their good relationship with their offices. Should there be concerns in that those offices being either coerced to do something? I don't know the laws. I mean, again, like, I came to US as an international student and have dealt a lot with those offices, and do know that a very helpful caseworker, whatever, I forgot the name, can be really critical in, like, making things easy for you, facilitate things, and as such. So folks do rely on those people, need to notify them when they travel, and as such. What would be an advice in this situation, especially, and I think there will be one more question and I think that's something that we are seeing in the case of Mahmoud Khalil and Rumeisa from Tufts, is that they were doxxed, right? So in the case of Rumeisa, the Tufts student, she wasn't as high profile, but she was doxxed on Canary mission. So for folks who had been doxxed, like, is there an additional layer of advice that we should think about? And just as a note, if anybody on this call has faced doxing, we do have some anti-doxing tools that we have developed together with Equality Labs that will be happy to share with you. I'll put my email in the chat, and do please either send an email or even, this is my number, to text me, and as such, I will make sure to get that over to you. But I'll pause there. I guess those two questions.
For the international student offices, I think it depends on the school, and I think it depends on the caseworker you're working with. So I don't know the offices, I don't know the people, but you do. So I'd imagine, well, that's a cute kid. I'd imagine that at a school that is maybe conceding more right now to Trump, like a Columbia, you may not want to trust that office as much. But at the same time, I mean, I've been in situations where a particular system is maybe adversarial, but there's an employee who has like a very forward facing job who that employee is still very down. And I wouldn't be surprised to hear that the Columbia, international student officer person is really still working with international students and really cares about them because that's why they got into the job, and they really want to do everything they can to help. It may mean that when you talk with them, you speak to them instead of writing to them so that there's not as much of a record. So even if that person individually is great, and the office or maybe an office higher than them is not, that they can't get those records, whatever the records may be of your conversations. Yeah, I would say that is probably my advice because as far as I'm aware, I have a brother who's also Ugandan, and he's just enamored with the help that his international student liaison person was able to do for him. So yeah, I know they do a lot of really good work. Adam, I'm not sure if you have different advice or thoughts on that.
No, I think right, it probably depends on each specific situation. I think something too, just in general, I feel like it's like somewhat like when your employer has an attorney and people are like, oh, this is my attorney or something like that. Where, you know, these people are hired by the university, right? So at the end of the day, like they're probably their goal may be to, help the university make sure that they're doing everything under the law. Now, with the law being changed or interpreted differently, they may they may not be standing up as much for individual students in certain cases. So if you're seeing that, I think let us know and we can try to work around that. But I think it's a tough situation to know. But I think just with everything is like take it with a little grain of salt. With I think with dealing with any of the educational institutions right now, because even if they don't want to be targeting Muslim, Palestinian, Black, and Brown students, like that's what they're doing across the board. And now that you have the federal government like withholding actual millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to certain institutions, um, they can start to act even stranger than they have been acting, I think, in the past year. Just something to be aware of, possibly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm jaded on educational institutions right now.
And then there was a second question. I can't remember what it was.
The second question is I'm for some reason blanking now
The
as well.
doxing.
It's very close to iftar. So
Yeah, yeah, close
Was
to
it involving the doxing?
yeah. So, like, any additional advice for students who have faced doxing? Thank you, Adam. Yeah, thanks.
yeah, good job. Good job. Takes a village. I in my experience, there really isn't much. I'm actually really Adam, I'd love for you to send me the guide because the only the only doxing advice I really have is don't get doxed. Do the things beforehand to prevent it. It's definitely one of those things that's easier to prevent than to do something with it afterwards because at least from a legal standpoint, um, usually most doxing is still within First Amendment protections. Unfortunately, the we don't need to talk about the bad history of the ACLU right now, but don't you worry. I'm aware of it. It was before me, but I also am still critical of it whenever it rears its ugly head in ACLU-PA and elsewhere, and I fight against it internally. But the flip side of free speech for folks who are speaking out about causes we support are those who are speaking against us or speaking out about causes we don't support. And I think that that's when that it's tricky. And so yeah. Also, for what it's worth, at ACLPA, we really haven't had any instances where somebody speaking out against something I don't support have reached out because I don't know if you've noticed, but the Trump administration doesn't go after all speakers, just a couple of them. So
Indeed, indeed. All right. I guess to keep this reasonable, we'll close. I just want to ask our audience one last time if there are any questions. So please type in the chat or in the chat say audio and I will unmute you. All right. I guess not. As always, like, you can reach out. Adam, do you mind also putting down your email in the chat? And Solomon, thank you for putting your email in the chat. We truly appreciate both of you and this partnership. And thank you to all of our community members for staying strong, reaching out when you need. We are here for one another. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. Have a good evening. Thanks.
thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you, Solomon. So,
Of course, yeah. Thank you both for inviting me and welcome on. I always, like I said, I always love working with y'all.
Come do that.
Thank you so much.